Why did they hide her ammunition? That was the question burning under her calm exterior, a question no one would answer. She didn't shout, didn't curse. She just stood there, the early Carolina humidity clinging to her uniform, while the Marine gunnery sergeant looked at her like she'd broken some unspoken law. How, he demanded, eyes narrowing. How had she done it? How had she put 5 rounds through a single hole at 600 yards, with ammunition she had built herself? Carver said nothing. The barrel of her rifle shimmered in the rising heat, the metal breathing steam like it was alive. The Marines hadn't known. They thought they could stall her, delay her issued ammo shipment, make her stumble before the competition even began. They thought they could make her wait. But she didn't wait. She built. And when her rifle barked across the range that morning, the sound cut through the air like defiance itself. Quiet, absolute, impossible to ignore. She'd turned 29 2 weeks earlier. Camp, North Carolina, a place where sweat came before sunrise, and the air felt like it was pressing down on you, reminding you how small you were in uniform. She was an Army Staff Sergeant assigned to the Joint Service Sniper Instructor Cadre, a program meant to test, train, and unify the best marksmen from every branch. But under the banners and briefings, everyone knew what it really was: competition. Army versus Marines, Air Force versus Navy, pride dressed up as professionalism. She'd been in the Army for 8 years, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, one as a designated marksman, the other as part of a sniper team tucked into the mountains near the Pakistani border, where the wind could change direction faster than a thought. She had learned that survival wasn't about confidence, it was about humility. Because the wind doesn't care how skilled you think you are. That lesson stayed with her long after the deployments ended, long after the medals got boxed away. Most days ran the stress course, an obstacle gauntlet where shooters were forced to hit targets after sprinting, crawling, carrying 50 pounds of gear through mud and heat. It broke even the strong ones. Most evenings, she stayed after dark, helping students who didn't quite get it, the ones who thought better optics could make up for shaky fundamentals. She never raised her voice, never lectured. She would just take the rifle, fire 1 round, and show them where patience ended and precision began. They called her the ghost instructor. Because she didn't make noise, she made impact. But there was something no one knew about her. Before the uniform, before Afghanistan, before the Army even knew her name, she learned everything she knew about precision from a barn in eastern Kentucky. A barn filled with sawdust, oil, and the scent of gunpowder, where her grandfather, a quiet gunsmith with arthritic hands, taught her the language of ballistics. He didn't call it science, he called it respect. Every measurement is a promise, he used to say, and promises ain't supposed to break. When she was 10, she could weigh powder charges within 1/10 of a grain. When she was 12, she could seat a bullet to the exact depth by touch alone. By 14, she could fix a rifle most adults couldn't disassemble. He taught her that accuracy wasn't about chasing perfection. It was about eliminating excuses. Her father had been a machinist, a steady man, killed in a factory accident when she was 14. After that, her mother worked double shifts at the diner. The house felt hollow, the barn didn't. The barn became the place where grief had a rhythm: press, measure, seat, crimp, breathe. Precision was the only thing that didn't lie. At 18, she joined the Army. At basic training, she shot expert on her first qualification. At Fort Benning, she finished 3rd in her sniper school class. Not because she was faster, but because she never missed the same way twice. What the Army gave her was structure. What her grandfather gave her was mastery. She learned to read terrain like a language, mirage lines whispering wind speed, dust movement marking unseen currents. And through all of it, one belief hardened inside her. When someone tries to make you fail, The best revenge is precision. The inter-service competition was the kind of event that lived in quiet legend. 3 days of long-range shooting, unknown distances, moving targets, and mental breakdowns disguised as drills. Each service and its best sniper team had been chosen as the Army's primary shooter. Her spotter, Staff Sergeant, had deployed 4 times and trusted her completely because she never needed to explain her logic. Her results spoke louder than her words. Across the lineup, the Marine Corps had sent their ace, Gunnery Sergeant, a man with medals for marksmanship and a reputation for arrogance. He didn't like that the Army had won 2 years in a row. And he really didn't like that the Army's lead shooter was a woman. 3 days before the competition, walked into the arms room to pick up her issued match-grade ammunition, 200 rounds of M118 LR, factory lot tested, government certified. The armorer checked his manifest, frowned. He said her lot was delayed. He said there'd been a supply discrepancy. He said maybe it would arrive by day 2, maybe. Administrative error, he called it. She didn't argue, just stood there and let him finish the script he'd been given. Outside, waited under the shade of a truck canopy, chewing gum, eyes already scanning her face. He didn't need her to say anything. "They did it, didn't they?" he muttered. She nodded once. The Marines had connections, always had. Knew people who knew people, the kind of men who could reroute an ammo shipment without leaving a fingerprint. Swore under his breath, "You want me to talk to Hayes?" Shook her head. "No, they want me rattled. I'm not giving them that." Then she said something that made him stop chewing. "I've got a backup plan." That night she unlocked a small steel case under her bunk. Inside, wrapped in an old towel, was her reloading kit, a hand press, micrometer dies, a digital scale, and a small journal marked with years of notes and load data. Some of those tools had belonged to her grandfather. Others she'd bought used, back when she didn't know if she'd ever afford new ones. The metal was worn smooth in places from years of touch. She laid everything out on the desk under the dim yellow light, wiped her hands clean, and started building her own ammunition. Not the way factories do, by volume and speed, but by feel. Every brass case inspected under light. Every powder charge weighed twice. Every bullet seated with exact, deliberate pressure. The process became a kind of meditation. Outside, the base slept. Inside, a soldier built her answer to sabotage, 1 cartridge at a time. By dawn, there were 50 rounds lined up on a folded towel, each one identical, each one perfect. She sat on the edge of her bunk and stared at them. Little brass acts of defiance. She thought of her grandfather's words again. "Some things you can't control, so master the things you can." That night in Kentucky came back to her, the week after her father's funeral, when she'd cried into her sleeve while holding a rifle that felt heavier than grief itself. He'd told her to shoot, not because it would fix anything, but because it would give her back something she could control. Precision. She'd hit a 2-inch group that day at 300 yards, tears still on her cheeks. She hadn't missed since. Before sunrise, she walked the quiet road to the range. The dew soaked through her boots. The morning fog lifted like a curtain. Captain Hayes, the Marine range officer, stood beside the chronograph station, clipboard in hand. Approached him calmly, rifle slung, box of tucked against her chest. "Sir, I need to register ammunition for chronograph testing," she said. Hayes frowned. "You these?" "Yes, sir." He motioned to the range armorer. They ran 10 of her rounds across the chronograph. Velocity spread, 6 feet per second. Then the government-issued M118 LR lot they'd tested the day before. The armorer looked at her, then at Hayes. Hayes exhaled. "You're cleared to use them, Sergeant. I'll file a note in the after-action." "Thank you, sir." She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The line went hot at 600. 10 shots, known distance, 600 yards. Dropped into prone, checked her dope card, adjusted the parallax, and exhaled once. The rifle spoke 10 times. Each report rolled downrange, echoing across the pine trees like thunder stitched with rhythm. When it was over, she stood and waited. The range officer walked the line with a tape measure, checking group spreads. He stopped at her target, leaned in, measured twice. Then he turned, half-minute group of the day. Even the Marines went quiet. Walked over, jaw tight. "What ammo are you using?" His voice was steady. "Mine." "Yours?" "Loaded it last night." He stared at her, then at the target. "You're telling me outshot factory match grade?" She shrugged slightly. "I'm not telling you anything, Gunny. The target is." He didn't respond, just turned and walked away, the kind of silence that comes when pride tastes like ash. That night she sat on the range bleachers long after sunset. The air smelled like brass and dirt and burned powder. She thought about what the Marines had tried to do, about how small acts of sabotage always reveal something deeper: fear. Fear of being outdone. Fear of being proven wrong. Fear that someone they underestimated might actually be better. She didn't hate them for it, not anymore. Because she understood something they didn't. Sabotage only works when your target doesn't know how to build victory from nothing. And she'd been building her whole life. But she didn't know yet, this was only the beginning. Because someone else on that range had been watching her, quietly, intently, and the decision they were about to make would test her precision in a way no rifle ever could. There are battles fought with bullets, and then there are battles fought with silence. And the second kind is always harder to win. What did it feel like to be underestimated again? For Carver, it was familiar, like humidity pressing against her chest, invisible but constant. People didn't say it outright anymore. They just let their silences speak for them. And silence can be than words. The morning after her impossible group at 600 yards, the range was louder than usual. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had heard about it. A female staff sergeant from the Army outshot the Marines on their own range, using ammunition she built by hand. The rumor moved faster than wind. By sunrise, every firing line had its own version of the story, and in every version, disbelief hung like smoke. Found her in the mess hall, coffee in one hand, range maps in the other. He slid into the seat across from her, voice low. "You realize you just started a small war out there." She stirred her coffee once. "Didn't start anything, I just shot." He grinned. "You didn't just shoot. You embarrassed a gunny with 3 combat commendations and an ego the size of." His gaze drifted toward the window. Marines passed outside, their laughter sharp and clipped. "They'll get over it," she said quietly. But she knew better. Men didn't get over being proven wrong by someone they'd written off. They got even, or they tried to. Later that morning, she sat alone at the armory bench, cleaning her rifle. The bolt clicked like a metronome. Metal, oil, precision, these were her comfort zones. But beneath the rhythm, something gnawed at her. Recognition felt good, but it also painted a target. The Army team had won the last 2 competitions. The Marines wanted redemption, and the fact that she had led day 1 meant the whispers wouldn't stop. She'd seen it before, the way soldiers looked when a woman succeeded in spaces they thought were sacred. It wasn't rage, it was doubt disguised as camaraderie. 1,000 micro-expressions that said, "She got lucky." The door opened. Captain Hayes, the Marine range officer, stepped in. He wasn't smiling. "Sergeant Carver, walk with me," he said. They stepped outside. Heat rippled off the tarmac. "I've started the formal report about your ammunition," Hayes began. "Your documentation checks out. Still, Hire wants a review procedure." "Understood, sir." He paused. Off the record, that was some shooting yesterday. You made a few people nervous. Gave a small, tired smile. Nervous people tend to learn faster. Hayes chuckled softly. Maybe so, just keep your head down, Sergeant. Not everyone likes change. She nodded, though she already knew. By midday, she and were on the training loop for the Day 2 course. Unknown distances, unpredictable winds, limited time. This event wasn't about memory. It was about instinct, seeing, calculating, trusting. Scanned through his spotting scope. Target 6 looks like 850. Mirage says right to left, maybe 5 miles an hour. Adjusted her turret, steady, calm. 845, she corrected. Hold 2.5 left. He grinned. I don't even argue with you anymore. You used to, she said. Yeah, then you kept being right. The wind tugged at the grass like an invisible tide. She breathed with it in rhythm, not against it. One breath, one trigger press. The steel plate rang faintly downrange. Impact confirmed. They moved again, target to target, each shot deliberate, each hit a quiet statement. By the time they finished the course, she felt that strange mixture of exhaustion and serenity that only focus can give. The kind that comes when mind, rifle, and breath move as one. When scores went up that afternoon, the Army team sat on top again. Perfect hits. The Marines had missed 4. Was waiting near the range tower, arms crossed. He didn't speak when she passed, but his stare followed like crosshairs. Leaned close, ignore him. She didn't answer, because part of her didn't want to ignore him. Part of her wanted to know why men like him needed to see her stumble. But she also knew something her grandfather once said. You don't argue with wind, you read it and adjust. So she adjusted and walked on. That night the sky broke open with rain. The tents shuddered, lightning rolling across the ocean line beyond the tree line. She sat in her bunk, writing in the small logbook she kept since Kentucky, a habit she never lost. Every load, every group, every observation. But tonight, her pen didn't move for a long time. Instead, she stared at the ink stains on her fingers. Each mark told a story. Of days when precision was survival, not sport. Of nights in Afghanistan, listening to radio silence between sniper teams, waiting for voices that never came back. People thought competitions were just games. But for her, every trigger pull echoed back to the mountains, to nights lit only by tracers and fear. You learned fast or you didn't come home. His voice cut through the rain. You awake. Yeah. He poked his head through the flap. Briefing in 10. Hayes wants everyone in the main tent. The air inside smelled like wet nylon and gun oil. Captain Hayes stood at the front, rainwater dripping from his cap brim. His voice carried over the storm. Investigation done, he announced. Supply chain was tampered with. Someone redirected the Army ammo shipment. We have names, disciplinary actions pending. A low murmur rippled through the tent. Hayes's tone hardened. Interference with competition equipment or ammo will not be tolerated. Anyone caught again will face UCMJ action. That's it. Silence. Then slowly, all eyes drifted toward. She didn't move, didn't blink. Shifted beside her, a wall between her and the stairs. Was in the corner, his face unreadable, not anger, not guilt, something else, the quiet ache of realization. When the briefing ended, stood. Hayes met her eyes, gave a short nod, respect simple and earned. That was enough. The third day dawned clear, the kind of crisp morning that smells like possibility and gunpowder. Team stress shoot. Moving targets, variable wind, time transitions. This was the decider. Checked his notes. We're leading by a wide margin, but they'll push hard today. I know, she said, tightening the sling on her arm. He hesitated. You sure you're good? Looked at him, eyes steady. Good doesn't matter, consistent does. They took their firing lane, called ranges red wind. Her heartbeat slowed, 72, 68, 64, until it matched the metronome rhythm she'd trained into her breathing. Target 290, right to left 7. Copy. She fired. Hit. Moving. They flowed together like choreography. Shot adjust, move confirm. By the final buzzer, they'd cleared every target. When scores posted that evening, it wasn't even close. Army first place, by a margin so wide the data looked wrong. The awards ceremony was held under a hangar bay strung with cheap lights. Captain Hayes handed her the trophy, silver, heavy, engraved with years of rivalry. He said, "True marksmanship isn't about perfect conditions. It's about grace when everything falls apart." The Marines applauded, some half-hearted, some genuine. Stood in the back, arms crossed, unreadable. She caught his eyes for a moment, long enough to see something shift there. Not resentment, not anger. Respect trying to find its voice. 2 days later, she found him waiting at the range. No arrogance now, just a man standing in the rain, holding a coffee he'd forgotten to drink. "You proved me wrong," he said quietly. Slung her rifle case over her shoulder, didn't know it was a contest. He managed a faint smile. "It always is. 20 years in the Corps, I thought skill came from money, gear, training. Then you show up with a hand press older than me and outshoot factory match grade." He paused. "Would you teach us, teach me, the tuning, whatever magic that was?" Studied him. She saw sincerity where there had once been condescension. "Sure," she said. "It's not magic, it's patience." Nodded once, as if patience was the rarest ammunition of all. 3 months later, she stood in a classroom at 15 Marine snipers watched as she measured powder on a digital scale that once sat on her grandfather's bench. She spoke the way he used to, steady, grounded, no ego. "Precision isn't about the best equipment," she said. "It's about knowing your tools so well you don't need the best ones." They listened, took notes. Some even smiled. One Marine raised his hand. "Where'd you learn this, ma'am?" She smiled faintly. "In a barn in Kentucky, from a man who thought every measurement was a promise." The room went still. The weight of that sentence landed deeper than she expected. Because in that moment, they all understood. The ammo wasn't the miracle. She was. After class, walked outside into the Virginia wind. The trees swayed like slow metronomes. Called later that night, teasing her about training the enemy. She laughed, the kind of laugh that comes only when you know you've earned peace the hard way. But peace never lasts forever. There would be new courses, new challenges, new people waiting to test her resolve. Yet she knew something now that she hadn't before. Sabotage hadn't broken her. It had refined her. And the silence that once hurt now felt different, no longer dismissal, but awe. Sometimes dignity doesn't need to shout. It simply acts. What happens when victory feels too quiet? Carver had thought success would sound like applause. But standing in that classroom, watching the Marines pack up their notebooks and thank her for lessons she'd once been mocked for knowing, it felt still. Almost too still. Maybe that's what real change sounds like: silence, the kind that settles after resistance has burned out. The kind that replaces pride with understanding. Still, the quiet unnerved her, because quiet never lasted long in her world. After the course ended, the base returned to its usual rhythm. Weapons fire in the distance, trucks crawling the perimeter roads, seagulls circling the bay like lazy sentries. Spent her evenings in the reloading room the Marines had given her to use. A small space tucked behind the armory, fluorescent lights humming above benches lined with brass and powder scales. It was nothing like her grandfather's barn, but it carried the same peace. The same solitude. the same faint smell of oil and gunpowder that clung to memory like dust on wood. She'd always found comfort in the repetition: weigh, seat, measure, record. Every step was a small defiance against chaos. The world could be unpredictable, people could betray you. But a bullet built right never lied. Called once a week from Fort Benning. "How's the marine world treating you?" he asked one night over static-filled connection. "They stopped looking at me like I stole something," she said. "That's progress." "They still whisper, but now it's questions, not jokes." He laughed. "Careful, Carver, you're becoming a legend." "Legends are for dead people," she said softly. "I'll settle for useful." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Got a call from higher. There's talk of a joint operational assessment. They want the best instructors from each service to run a live fire test, something about evaluating precision doctrine for deployment use." "Deployment," she repeated, her chest tightening slightly. "Yeah, nothing official yet, just whispers. You know how that goes." She did. Whispers had a way of becoming orders overnight. A week later, she received the memo. Subject: Joint Precision Engagement Evaluation. Location: Range Complex, Nevada. Duration: 21 days. Personnel: cross-branch instructors, invited observers, classified testing. No further details. She folded the paper neatly, slid it into her journal, and took a long breath. Desert ranges meant heat, isolation, and long hours behind glass. But they also meant truth, stripped of politics, stripped of ceremony. Just shooters and silence. She'd take that any day. The flight to Nevada was full of uniforms and unspoken hierarchy. Was there too, surprisingly. He'd been reassigned to the evaluation team, his demeanor quieter now, the old edge replaced by something closer to curiosity. When he saw her boarding, he gave a small nod. "Guess we're on the same side this time." Adjusted her rucksack strap. "Maybe we always were, you just didn't know it." He smiled faintly. "Fair enough." Range sprawled like a scar across the desert, sand, rock, and horizon, stretching wider than belief. The sun punished everything equally. By 700, rifle barrels were too hot to touch. The team set up base camp near a dried riverbed, their tents arranged in neat rows like a miniature outpost in nowhere. Hayes, now promoted to major, was running the program. He greeted them with the same clipped professionalism remembered. "Objectives simple," he said. "We're here to test inter-branch precision engagement systems under realistic stress conditions." Translation: we find out who can adapt when the plan falls apart. There it was again, the same challenge she'd lived her career around. Adapt when the plan falls apart. The first week passed in a haze of dust and sun. Daytime shoots, night optics evaluations, endurance drills. Worked alongside a mixed team: 2 Air Force JTACs, a Navy SEAL spotter, and a Marine observer assigned to record ballistic performance data. The Marine observer was quiet, almost too polite, a corporal named Shaw. He watched her reloading process with fascination, sometimes asking questions that seemed harmless. "How do you keep track of powder temperature out here? Does barrel wear affect your depth seating? What kind of spread are you aiming for?" She answered politely but carefully, giving him enough to seem open, not enough to be studied. Because something about his questions felt rehearsed. One evening, after a 10-hour range cycle, returned to her tent and noticed her reloading logbook wasn't where she'd left it. It wasn't missing, just moved. An inch to the left. The corner of the towel slightly unfolded. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but was built on noticing. She stood still for a long minute, eyes scanning every small detail: boot prints, dust patterns, zip direction. Then she exhaled slowly. Someone had been inside. She locked the journal away in her rifle case that night, securing the latch with a small cable lock she'd brought from Kentucky. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. But as she lay awake, the desert wind whistling against the canvas, a single question looped through her head. Why? She stopped being a target months ago. The Marines had made peace. The investigation had closed. So who would need her data now? The answer arrived the next morning, indirectly, and with a sting. During the daily briefing, Hayes announced a special demonstration. Tomorrow, we'll be testing long-range load variance data. Carver, will be using your documented specifications as baseline control. Her stomach tightened. My specs, sir. Yes, Corporal Shaw's been reviewing your data. HQ wants to replicate your using government equipment for comparison. She froze. The others around her murmured approval. It sounded flattering. But it was. Because in her world, replicating meant dissecting, turning her personal method, her craft, her grandfather's legacy, into data for a procurement report. She wanted to protest, but Hayes's tone was final. It's a chance to validate your technique on record, Sergeant. You should be proud. She nodded, masking the storm behind her eyes. Pride wasn't the word for what she felt. That night, she walked out past the perimeter lights and sat on a ridge overlooking the dark expanse. The desert was silent, except for wind scraping over rock. She thought about her grandfather again, about how he never wrote his secrets down, never patented his processes, never trusted systems that tried to own human skill. He'd told her once, knowledge has soul, you don't give it to people who only want to measure it. She closed her eyes. The stars burned sharp above her, thousands of silent witnesses to the same lesson. She could almost hear his voice. They can copy your numbers, kiddo, but they'll never copy your patience. The next morning, she watched from a distance as Shaw and two technicians loaded test rounds into a Marine-issued rifle. They followed her data sheet exactly. Same powder weight. Same seating depth. Same bullet type. The only difference, the hands that built them. When the first shot broke, the impact landed 4 inches off center. The second 3. The third a flyer. Shaw frowned. Something off. The data matches perfectly. Said nothing. She just watched the mirage shimmer above the target line, hiding her small, knowing smile. Hayes turned to her. Any theories, Sergeant? Just one, she said quietly. You can't patience. No one spoke for a moment. Then Hayes nodded slowly, understanding. The test ended early. The results were logged, variance unaccounted for. Shaw didn't meet her eyes again. Later that evening, as she was cleaning her rifle, walked into the reloading shed. He held one of the test cartridges between his fingers. Looks perfect, he said, but it isn't, is it? Didn't look up. Perfection doesn't exist. Consistency does. He nodded. You know, I used to think marksmanship was about dominance. Outshoot the other guy, win the trophy. But you. He stopped, searching for words. You made it about integrity. She paused mid-stroke, then set the rifle down gently. Integrity's the one variable you can't correct for. He smiled. Maybe that's what scares people. Maybe. They stood there in the hum of fluorescent light, two soldiers on opposite sides of pride, now leveled by understanding. By the final week, precision data had become the benchmark for every test. She didn't fight it anymore. If they were going to learn, she'd at least make sure they learned it right. She spent long hours teaching proper case prep, explaining barrel harmonics, demonstrating micro-adjustments under field conditions. Even Shaw, once the silent observer, started showing humility. Sergeant, he said one afternoon, I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have gone through your log. Looked at him for a long second, then said, You didn't go through my log. You went through my story. Don't do that to people. He nodded, shame in his eyes. Understood. The final day brought the report briefing. Hayes summarized findings, rattled off statistics, then paused on her name. Staff Sergeant Carver's data has set a new consistency record for field-built ammunition under combat-simulated conditions. Her methodology will be submitted for inter-service integration review. Applause echoed through the tent. Just sat still, her fingers loosely around a coffee cup gone cold. It wasn't pride she felt. It was closure, the kind that comes when something personal becomes universal. But even as the applause faded, she found herself whispering under her breath, "Grandpa, we did it." That night she packed her gear. Outside, the desert wind had softened, carrying the smell of dust and spent brass. She zipped her rifle case, looked around the tent one last time, and smiled faintly. Every war leaves something behind, a story, a scar, a truth. Hers was simple. The world had tried to measure her worth in calibers and categories. She answered in silence and precision. And somewhere in that silence, she'd found herself again. But as she boarded the flight home the next morning, a new message waited in her inbox. Subject line, Operational Evaluation Extension, pending assignment. Her heart slowed. The mission wasn't over. Not yet. What do you do when precision isn't enough? That was the question waiting in Carver's inbox the morning after she returned to Fort Benning, though she didn't know it yet. She'd landed late, body still wired from weeks in the Nevada desert, eyes too used to horizon lines and mirage. The barracks felt smaller now. Civilization had a hum she'd forgotten. Phones, chatter, vending machines, noise that filled the space where silence used to teach. She dropped her bag, sat on the edge of the bunk, and opened the laptop. From HQ Training Directorate. Subject Operational Evaluation Extension, pending assignment. Details classified. Report date 600 Monday. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. It didn't say where, it didn't say why. Just one word at the bottom, approved. She closed the lid. The Army didn't ask, it told. And something about this one felt different, too quiet, too fast. She'd just come off a joint evaluation meant to end her testing cycle. Why extend it? Monday arrived with fog and questions. She was escorted to a secure briefing room by a captain she didn't recognize, new face, new tone. Inside, Major Hayes waited, his expression unreadable. "Good to see you again, Carver," he said. "Sit down." She did. On the table were 3 folders, each stamped with thick red ink. Operational Deployment, Joint Asset Evaluation. Hayes flipped one open. Satellite photos, rugged terrain, structures buried into hillsides. "This isn't competition anymore," he began. "This is assessment field drill. You'll be embedded with a small cross-branch advisory element. Location, classified. Mission, confirm and neutralize illegal weapons testing sites suspected to be using U.S. ballistic tech." His jaw tightened. Real targets. Yes, but limited engagement. Intelligence-driven. You'll be advising, not leading. She studied the imagery. Mountains, wind patterns visible even in the satellite haze. She recognized the terrain instinctively. "Afghanistan," she said quietly. Hayes didn't deny it. Northern sector, near the old border ridges. For a moment the air in the room thickened, not from heat, but from memory. The last time she'd been there, she'd lost a teammate to wind she couldn't predict. Now they wanted her back. By the time the C-17 wheels hit tarmac on a moonless night, her heartbeat had settled into its old rhythm, cautious, cold, professional. This wasn't the competition range anymore. This was the echo of war, where every sound had weight. The forward operating base was minimal. Half a dozen tents, a single radar dish, and a generator that coughed like an old smoker. Waiting there was a small joint team. 3 Army operators, 2 Marines, one Air Force JTAC, and a Navy intel officer named, who spoke fast and smiled rarely. He briefed them under red light. The site, in the Northern Valley, 4 clicks inside unstable territory. Locals report vehicles moving at night. Satellite confirms metallic signatures, possible illegal test rigs. He looked at "You'll be overwatch and ballistic verification. Your job, not to shoot, it's to see." She nodded once. That was fine by her. Seeing was what she did best. They moved out before dawn, convoying in silence. The land was cruelly familiar, jagged, cold, indifferent. Every shadow looked like memory. Wasn't here this time, just strangers wearing ranks she didn't know yet. But teamwork didn't need names. It needed trust, and that had to be earned the slow way. At 700, they reached a overlooking the valley. Through her scope, saw what it described. A series of structures half buried under sand and rock, camouflaged but not invisible. Antenna masts, fuel drums, tarps covering what looked like testing benches. Her stomach turned. Not because of danger, but because of the sight of the test rig. She recognized it. Her mind went back to the Nevada range. The same design, the same barrel harmonics measurement device she'd helped calibrate for the evaluation. Her voice was steady but colder. "That's our tech prototype system, not supposed to be here." Cursed softly, then someone selling secrets. By late afternoon, a storm rolled in. The valley wind howled through the ravine, scattering dust like smoke. The team hunkered in their observation post, tension building. The Marines argued quietly about extraction timing. The Army operator, a sergeant first class named, kept his radio low, eyes scanning for movement. Sat apart, her scope trained downrange. She stopped hearing the wind. She was reading it again, the way she always did, through grass bends and dust drift, through instinct and memory. Then she saw them. 3 figures emerging from behind the structures. Civilian dress, moving equipment, loading crates into a covered truck. Leaned in beside her. "What do you see?" She focused, adjusting parallax. Tools, no weapons visible, but they're handling cartridges, heavy. "Explosives." She exhaled. "No ammunition." Her pulse quickened. Those weren't normal crates. She knew the pattern. Those were ballistic casing boxes, the same kind she'd seen issued for prototype testing. Someone wasn't just stealing tech, they were manufacturing it. Radioed command. No immediate response. Signal was weak, storm interference. They'd have to hold position until window. Stayed behind the rifle for hours, eyes burning from focus. Watching, recording, waiting. There was something unnervingly personal about what she saw, men using her craft for something dirty, something hollow. Precision without purpose. The kind her grandfather would called soulless work. The valley glowed orange at sunset. She couldn't tell if it was dust or guilt burning in her chest. Night came hard. The storm finally broke around midnight. That's when she heard it, distant engines. "Movement," she whispered. 2 trucks inbound from the East Ridge. Lights off. Estimated 5 minutes to sight. Leaned over, friendly. No IFF signal, not friendly. His face went tight. Command still dark. "We move in silent, eyes on. No shots unless fired upon." Swallowed hard. Observation was one thing. Watching betrayal was another. Through her thermal, she saw the truck stop near the sheds. Figures jumped out, weapons slung, voices muffled. Then a flash. One of the men struck another hard. A confrontation, something wasn't right. She focused. The man giving orders, tall, broad, moving like he'd been trained. Military posture. He turned toward the truck lights, just enough for the image to resolve. Her stomach dropped. She recognized the face. Corporal Shaw. The Marine observer from the Nevada tests. She blinked once, not believing it. But it was him, same stance, same tilt of head. Her throat tightened. That's Shaw, Marine Corps Ballistic Tech Division. He was at the evaluation. His jaw clenched. You sure? 100%. Cursed softly. So much for friendly firewalls. His hands went cold around the rifle stock. The man who'd once stolen her notes was now using her data, out here, in the dark, on foreign soil. A betrayal built with her precision. She lowered her face behind the stock and whispered, "What are you doing, Shaw?" The storm wind answered with silence. Suddenly, muzzle flash. One of the valley figures went down. Chaos broke out below. Shouting, engines revving, lights flaring through dust. Hissed, contact, confirm hostile fire. Through her scope, saw Shaw's team firing into the others, clean, controlled, tactical. No hesitation, no confusion. He wasn't caught in something. He was something. "Sir, that's an organized extraction," she said. "They're eliminating witnesses." "Command still down," snapped. "Carver, can you track targets?" "Yes." "Then do it. We need positions for intercept." She marked the coordinates quickly, voice steady despite the churn inside her. But when Shaw turned again, when the light hit his face just right, she saw the unmistakable look of calm conviction. Not fear, not greed. Belief. He believed in what he was doing. That terrified her more than anything. They watched until the trucks pulled out, engines fatting into the storm's edge. Ordered immediate movement. "Pack up, we follow the tracks, quiet and fast." Slung her rifle, heart heavy. This wasn't about shooting anymore. This was about responsibility. She built those measurements, those load tables. And now someone was using them to hurt people she'd never see. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she'd guilt. Because precision, without purpose, becomes complicity. They tracked the tire ruts for 2 miles before stopping near a ravine where the trucks had split. The night was quiet again, but she couldn't shake Shaw's face. The last time she'd seen him, he'd apologized for reading her log, said he understood, said he'd learned respect. Had he been lying the whole time? Or had something else changed him, orders, fear, belief? She didn't know. But the desert didn't care. The wind kept moving, erasing footprints faster than she could make sense of them. When they finally exfiltrated 2 days later, the mission was labeled inconclusive. Command had video, telemetry, reports, but no clear confirmation of affiliation. No arrests, no answers. Just silence. Sat on the ramp of the transport plane as dawn rose over the mountains, dust swirling like ghosts in the wind. She wanted to believe it was over. That her data hadn't damned anyone. That Shaw's betrayal was a fluke, not a pattern. But deep down she knew better. Knowledge is power. And power, once given, never stays clean. As the engines roared and the horizon tilted beneath her, she whispered to herself, half prayer, half confession. Precision's not peace. It's just control pretending to be it. For the first time in her life, the truth made her hands shake. And somewhere, far below the rising sun, someone else was already chambering a round built from her numbers. How do you live with precision when the world runs on chaos? That question haunted Carver long after she returned from the desert. The operation had ended without clarity. No arrests, no press, not even a debrief that made sense. Just the same phrase repeated through official channels. Assessment incomplete, classified follow-up pending. It should have been closure. But closure doesn't come when questions outnumber answers. And the silence was starting to sound like guilt. Back at Fort Benning, she sat through the standard reentry protocols, medical checks, mental health screenings, after-action interviews. All of it felt like noise. She learned long ago that bureaucracy talks to itself louder than it listens. Still, she played along. Yes, sir. No, sir. No unusual stress responses. Yes, my sleep is fine. None of it was true. Her nights were sleepless now. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Shaw's face in the scope, lit by firelight, calm, resolute. The way his finger tightened on the trigger like he was still following her training notes. It wasn't just betrayal. It was imitation. He had taken her precision and turned it into purpose, a dark one. 2 weeks later, a summons arrived. Office of Internal Evaluation, attendance mandatory. Subject unverified field actions, Northern Engagement Zone. She reported on time, uniform pressed, demeanor calm. A windowless room. 2 officers, a recorder on the table. Major Hayes wasn't there. Instead, an unfamiliar colonel handled the session, polite, detached, surgical in tone. He gestured toward the chair. Sit, Sergeant. She did. Do you know why you're here? I assume it's about the Northern operation, she said. He nodded. Correct. There were inconsistencies in the mission report. Specifically, your identification of one of the hostile actors as a U.S. service member. Her jaw tightened. Corporal Shaw, Marine ballistic technician. I confirmed visual ID. The colonel leaned back. That's the problem, Sergeant. According to Marine records, there is no active-duty corporal by that name assigned to any ballistic division. In fact, he flipped through the folder. There hasn't been one in over a year. Blinked, that's not possible. I trained him at 3 months ago. The colonel's expression didn't change. Then perhaps you trained someone using a false identity. The words landed like a physical hit. She tried to respond, but her throat was dry. He was vetted, she said finally. He had clearance, The colonel cut her off gently. We know. The investigation is ongoing. Until further notice, you are not to discuss this operation with anyone. Understood? Her pulse hammered. Sir, if there's a breach, I can help. I know his methods, his questions. He had access to my. Sergeant. The colonel's voice hardened. That will be all. She left the room without another word. Outside, the hallway felt colder than it should have. No one looked at her. Soldiers passed with the blank expression of people who learned not to ask. By evening, she was back in her quarters, staring at her reloading kit, the same tools that had once defined her purpose. Now they felt like evidence. She called. It took 3 rings for him to answer. You okay? He asked. Define okay. He exhaled. Heard you got pulled in for questioning. News travels fast. Rumors travel faster. What's going on? She hesitated. They told her not to talk. But had been her spotter, her closest ally. Silence with him felt like betrayal. There's something wrong, Gar, she said finally. The guy from Nevada, Shaw, they're saying he doesn't exist, but I know what I saw. He was quiet for a long time. Then, you sure command isn't covering tracks? She froze. What do you mean? Look, Carver, you embarrassed the wrong people at that evaluation. If tech you helped develop is showing up overseas, someone high up has explaining to do. It's easier if they make you look mistaken than admit they lost control. The thought hadn't occurred to her, not fully. But once said, it made too much sense. She rubbed her temples. So what, I'm supposed to just sit here? Until they stop watching you, yeah. Watching. He sighed. You didn't think this ended when you got home, did you? That night she walked the perimeter trail behind the base housing area. Alone, head down, thoughts louder than footsteps. The moon was high, cold, uncaring. For years she'd believed in the system, imperfect but honorable. Now she wasn't sure who was still on her side. She passed a parked car on the service road, tinted windows, engine off. Didn't think much of it until she saw the same car the next night. And the one after. Coincidence doesn't visit 3 nights in a row. She didn't confront it, didn't tell anyone. She just started writing again, every detail, every date, every time she saw that car. Precision wasn't just a skill anymore, it was survival. A week later, she was called back to the range, a quiet order, unofficial. Hayes was waiting. He looked different now, older, somehow tired. "Carver," he greeted softly, "you holding up?" She nodded, trying to. He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "I can't talk long, but you were right about Shaw. We've traced a data leak to a civilian contractor using Marine credentials. No official connection, but plenty of interest in ballistic prototypes." Her heart quickened. "Contractor who?" "Classified. What matters is your work's been compromised. Someone took your methodology from the Nevada logs and sold it. Foreign buyers, possibly corporate-backed." She gripped the rifle case handle until her knuckles whitened. "So it wasn't him." "Oh, it was him," Hayes said quietly, "just not who he said he was." He hesitated, then added, "You need to be careful. You're valuable, and not everyone wants that for the right reasons." Before she could reply, he was gone. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about the word he'd used. Valuable. It didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like a warning. Her skills, her data, her name, all of it had become currency. And someone out there was still spending it. Over the next days, she tried to lose herself in routine. She cleaned rifles that didn't need cleaning. She trained soldiers who didn't need training. But nothing silenced the questions. What if Shaw hadn't been alone? What if she'd built more than ammunition? What if she'd built a blueprint? The thought hit hardest at night, when her room was too quiet. She'd stare at her grandfather's old micrometer, still faintly engraved with his initials. The one he used to say was the measure of honesty. Now it felt like an accusation. Then came the envelope. Slipped under her door, no sender. Just a single line typed on plain paper. "You can't find him if you keep asking permission." No signature. But attached was a photo. Grainy, zoomed in. A man standing outside a warehouse, night vision hue washing him green. Shaw. Her chest tightened. The photo was time-stamped 2 days ago, in Germany. She went straight to. He opened the door half asleep. "Jesus." She shoved the photo into his hands. "Tell me this is fake." He stared. "Where'd you get it?" "I don't know. Someone left it under my door." He studied it again, expression darkening. "That's air base perimeter. I've been there, that's real." "So he's alive." "Looks that way." "Then the army's lying." Hesitated, "Or they don't know yet." She exhaled shakily. "I can't sit here, Gar, if he's operating under false ID on a NATO base." He interrupted softly. "You'll get court-martialed if you go rogue." She looked at him, eyes hollow but steady. "And if I don't, how many more people use my work to build something I can't control?" Silence. Then reluctantly he nodded. "If you're going, you don't go alone." 2 nights later, they boarded a civilian flight out of Dulles. No orders, no clearance. Just 2 soldiers carrying ghosts and one unanswered question. How deep does betrayal run before it stops being about revenge and starts being about truth? Stared out the window as the plane rose into cloud. Below her, America disappeared into darkness. Above her, dawn waited on the other side of the Atlantic. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but her pulse betrayed her. For the first time in years, she wasn't following instructions. She was following conscience. And conscience, she realized, doesn't salute. But she didn't know yet what waited for her in Germany, or how far the shadows of her own precision could reach. Because the next bullet fired in this story wouldn't be hers. How far do you chase the truth before it starts chasing you? That question followed Carver across the Atlantic. She didn't sleep on the flight. Didn't read, didn't talk. Just watched the thin red glow of the cabin, lights stretch across faces that all looked like strangers. Dozed beside her, arms folded, his quiet breathing steady as the hum of the engines. She is calm, because she couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. Shaw standing in the rain outside that warehouse. It wasn't just that he was alive. It was the way he stood, relaxed, confident. Like a man who didn't need to hide, because he believed no one would dare look. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for understanding. Because the shot that kills you, her grandfather once said, is never the one that hits your body. It's the one that hits your certainty. They landed in Frankfurt just before dawn. The air smelled of jet fuel and cold rain. Handled the travel logistics, fake orders, per justifications, the kind of military red tape that hides people in plain sight. He'd always been good at that, bending rules without breaking them. Had never been good at bending anything. They rented a gray hatchback from a kiosk and drove south. No music, just the hum of tires on wet asphalt and the low static of a shortwave radio had patched into for local traffic frequencies. "It's big," he said. "If he's using a civilian cover, we'll need eyes on the outskirts, lots of contractors in and out." Nodded, the photo looked like perimeter access, maybe a logistics hub. Gave her a side glance. "You've been running this in your head since Dulles, haven't you?" She smiled faintly. "You'd be disappointed if I hadn't." He didn't disagree. By midday, they reached a town just outside the base, Kaiserslautern, a place built on military gravity. Shops that sold tactical gear beside bakeries, cars with American plates, locals who spoke fluent English but avoided questions. They rented a room above a cache, no ID. From the window, could see the base gates in the distance, guarded, predictable. But she wasn't looking for gates. She was looking for patterns. That night they drove near the perimeter road, headlights off, speed slow. Glowed like a city made of steel and floodlight. Parked near a service trail. This is as close as we get without a badge. Adjusted her binoculars. Warehouse row, gate 12, same architecture as the photo. And there, under the pale halo of a security lamp, a figure stepped out of a black SUV. She froze. It was him. Corporal Shaw, or whatever name he was using now. He wore civilian clothes this time, carried a satchel, walked with purpose toward a side entrance guarded by private security, not military. Private. That word settled uneasily in her chest. Lowered his binoculars. "That's no Marine, those are contractors." "Which company?" He zoomed in. Hard to tell. No insignia, but the SUV's their Eurosec issue. They do logistics for NATO, but they've got clearance contracts stateside too. Frowned, so he's not gone rogue. He's gone corporate. Same thing, muttered. They watched Shaw disappear inside. His pulse quickened. "We need eyes in there." Turned slowly. "You mean you need eyes in there?" She didn't argue. She just opened the glove box and pulled out a folded jacket. "Give me 10 minutes. Inside the perimeter, the night was heavy with fog and generator noise. Moved like she had back in the mountains, low, silent, controlled. The uniform had changed, but the rhythm hadn't. She reached the outer fence, slipped through an unpatched gap near a drainage ditch and waited. Movement inside the warehouse, flashes of light through narrow windows. She crawled closer, the gravel crunching under her knees muffled by the fog. When she reached the loading bay, she saw them. Shaw and 2 men she didn't recognize, bent over a table stacked with ballistic casings and sealed envelopes. Her breath caught. The cartridges were stamped. Her lot numbers. the same experimental loads from the Nevada evaluation. She leaned closer. Their voices were faint but sharp. Transfer complete by next week. NATO will sign off once the specs match. Match, you said these were 1-to-1. They are, the rest's just paperwork. Stomach turned cold. They weren't selling ammunition. They were selling methodology. Government field-proven ballistics data, the same she'd built from scratch, now turned into a product. Then Shaw's voice cut through. She won't talk, he said. She's disciplined, too proud to make noise, that's why they picked her. Froze. Picked her? The other man asked, and if she does? Shaw shrugged. Then she becomes the scapegoat. That's what they designed it for. She's the perfect one to blame, clean record, female NCO, built for media sympathy. They'll use her name if they have to. For a second the world went quiet, like sound itself had been cut out. Pulse roared in her ears. They hadn't stolen her data. They used her to validate it. Her signature, her credentials, her entire reputation, a weaponized form of trust. She backed away slowly, the ground tilting beneath her boots. Every step felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. When she finally reached the ditch, was waiting crouched low. What the hell took? She shoved the binoculars into his chest. They're using me, Gar, my name, my data. They built this entire cover off my work. He blinked. What? She told him everything, the casings, the conversation, the setup. When she finished, he looked sick. Jesus, that's not just theft. That's a full-blown black contract. They're laundering R&D through a private shell, if that leaks. She cut him off. It won't leak, they'll bury it and me with it. Back at she paced the narrow room while typed furiously on his laptop. He pulled up procurement databases, contractor rosters, defense invoices. After 30 minutes, he stopped typing. There, he said, pointing to the screen. EUROSEC Contract 14991B. Ballistics Research Partnership, U.S. Advisory Division. Project Lead, Civilian Consultant James Shaw. Oversight Authority, Training Directorate DOD. Stared at it. The signature below was Shaw's. It was Hayes's. Her chest went cold. No, that can't. Scrolled further. Signed and approved 3 weeks before your deployment. She sank into the chair, breath trembling. Hayes, the man who taught her to stand tall when the system turned small. The one who'd warned her to be careful. He hadn't been protecting her. He'd been protecting himself. Shut the laptop. We need to go public. This goes beyond chain of command. Shook her head. If we leak it, we become targets. You know how this works. The moment we speak, they brand us unstable. So what then? You just keep quiet. She looked out the window. Rain streaked the glass like blurred tracer lines. No, she said finally. We get proof, the kind they can't bury. The next day, they returned to the warehouse. Rigged a small drone from spare parts, patched the feed through his phone. They launched it from the hillside at dusk. The screen flickered, shaky footage of the interior through a ventilation gap. Watched as Shaw and 2 others prepared another shipment. Documents on the table bore logos from both the Army and Eurosec, overlapping seals, authorizations. And then mid-frame, Hayes appeared. No rank insignia, civilian jacket. He spoke briefly to Shaw, signed something and left. Zoomed in on the document. Got it, he whispered. Time-stamped, location matched, that's our evidence. But didn't feel triumph. She felt hollow. Because she'd believed Hayes, believed in him. And belief, once broken, doesn't shatter loud. It dies quietly, like breath in cold air. They pulled the drone back, packed fast. Let's get this to the embassy, said. But before they reached the car, 2 black SUVs rolled onto the street, headlights cutting through the mist. Instincts flared, go. They ran. Down an alley, through a side street, the sound of boots and engines chasing close behind. Ducked into a service door. They slipped inside a dark stairwell, pressed against the wall, breath shallow. Outside, the vehicle slowed, doors opened. Voices echoed, clipped, foreign, professional. Private security again. Clenched her fists, they know. Whispered, then we've got one shot. Get this footage out before they find us. She nodded, eyes cold. You get the drone card to someone who can upload it. I'll draw them off. Don't argue, I'm the one they want. He hesitated, then pressed the data chip into her hand. You come back, you hear me. She smiled faintly. I'll try. Then she slipped into the rain, disappearing into the night. For the first time in her life, Carver wasn't following orders. She was breaking them, beautifully, deliberately. Not out of rebellion, but out of faith in something, truth. And as the storm swallowed her footsteps, she realized something her grandfather might said if he'd been there. Sometimes precision isn't about hitting the target. It's about aiming at what's right, even when the whole world tells you not to pull the trigger. How far can you run before duty catches up? Carver didn't know anymore. All she knew was rain, cold, endless, turning cobblestone streets slick beneath her boots as she cut through the back alleys of Kaiserslautern. Every sound carried weight now. A footstep could be a pursuer. A radio crackle could mean exposure. The same precision that once steadied her behind a rifle was now the thing keeping her alive without one. She ducked under a stone archway, caught her breath and listened. Engines, faint, maybe 2 blocks behind. They weren't rushing. Professionals never rush. She pressed her back to the wall and whispered into the small earpiece had left her. Status. Static, then his voice, tight but steady, still moving, uploads at 60%. I'm routing it through a relay in Brussels. If they jam it, it'll bounce through 6 NATO servers before it dies. Good, keep moving. You. Trying not to die. He gave a dry laugh. That's my favorite part of the plan. Then the line went dead, intentionally. He knew the risks of too much chatter, so did she. She waited until the wind shifted, then slipped back into the street, one shadow among hundreds. She found refuge in an old machine shop 2 blocks from the river. Dust, oil, rust, familiar smells. It reminded her of her grandfather's barn. For a moment she almost felt safe. She pulled a small folding map from her jacket, spread it across a workbench and marked 3 points. Her position, the warehouse and the bridge had planned to reach before upload completion. The distances weren't comforting. Too much open ground, too little time. She checked her pistol, 1 magazine half full. Old habit, she wasn't planning to fight. But habits are anchors when the world tilts. Her hand trembled for the first time, not from fear, from anger. All those years, she'd believed in quiet service. Do the work, be invisible, let precision speak louder than politics. Now her precision had been weaponized by men who saw morality as a flaw in the design. She whispered to herself, never again. Was already on the move. He ditched the car and taken the underground toward the north side of the city, carrying the data card sealed in a flash drive taped under his belt buckle. He blended in easily, tall, forgettable, one of those soldiers who'd learned to disappear in plain sight. But even as he moved, he felt the drag of guilt. He'd told her he'd get the footage out. He hadn't told her he was being followed too. A man 2 cars down, reading a newspaper that never turned pages. Another at the exit, pretending to check his phone but never looking at the screen. Contractors, he could tell by the stillness, the kind that comes from training, not patience. He exited 3 stops early, changed direction twice, and finally ducked into a near the station. From his seat by the window, he typed a short message into a secure contact channel. Have proof of unauthorized transfer. Includes DoD oversight. Needs safe extraction. Sending partial file now. He hit send. Then quietly he whispered, "Come on, buy me time." Back in the machine shop, heard the sound before she saw the light, a vehicle door slamming outside, followed by muffled voices. They'd found her. She killed the lantern and crouched low. Shadows cut across the windows. Two figures moved toward the door. She slipped behind a pillar, pistol ready but low. The handle turned slow, cautious. Then a voice. "Sergeant Carver." She froze. The tone was calm, familiar. "Major Hayes." "Put the weapon down," he said through the doorway. "We need to talk." Her heart stuttered. "You lost that right when you signed my name onto your deal." His voice stayed level. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me." A pause. "Then you were right about Shaw, but you were wrong about me." She edged closer to the doorway. "You're on the contracts, Hayes. Your signature's there." "I signed authorization for an R&D oversight. Shaw took it off book. He's not just selling data, he's selling operational models. He's working for a defense syndicate, not Eurosec. They're bigger, and they'll kill you if they think you can trace it back to them." "Then why follow me instead of helping me?" "I am helping you," he said quietly, "by getting you out alive." The second man beside him, not one of hers, stepped forward. "Sir, we're exposed." Hayes said quickly, "Please, come with me. You don't have time to." She didn't answer. Her instincts screamed louder than his voice. Something in his tone didn't match the words. She raised the pistol just as the glass behind her shattered. A silenced shot. The bullet missed by inches. She dove sideways, firing twice. The other man went down hard. Hayes ducked, shouting something she didn't hear. By the time she hit the ground, the shop was chaos, smoke, broken light, the metallic ring of spent brass. Then silence. She crawled to cover, coughing, gun still up. Hayes was gone. Through the haze, she saw a dark sedan peeling away outside, headlights vanishing into fog. He'd brought her into a trap. His upload reached 98% when the window exploded inward. He hit the floor instinctively. 2 rounds tore through the back wall. He rolled behind the counter, drew his sidearm and fired once, not to hit, just to distract. The attackers moved fast. 2 of them, black coats, suppressed weapons. He sprinted toward the kitchen, grabbed a metal chair, and smashed through the rear exit. A shot grazed his shoulder, hot, slicing pain, but he didn't stop. He ran until his lungs burned, cut down a narrow side alley, and pressed the transmit button on his comm. He gasped, "They've got me pinned. Uploads done, files live. You have to disappear now." Static. No response. He repeated louder, "It's done." Still nothing. He looked down, the signal light blinking red. Jam frequency. They were cutting him off. He slammed the comm down and kept running. Reached the river minutes later, still shaking. Every part of her training screamed for order, but nothing about this was orderly anymore. She tried the earpiece. Static. Then faintly, a broken voice. "Upload complete, they're here." "Say again." The line died. She stood on the bridge, staring at the dark water, trying to breathe. The lights of the base shimmered far in the distance, so close to the place that had started it all. For a moment, she thought about going back, turning herself in, explaining. Then she remembered Shaw's words in that warehouse. "They'll use her name if they have to." No one would believe her. And she didn't know if he was even alive. The world had gone perfectly silent again, the same kind of silence that used to mean victory. Now it just meant loss. She found shelter in a railway maintenance shack outside the city. It smelled of iron and rain. She wrapped her bleeding arm in a torn rag, stared at the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. Her reflection looked older, harder, almost unrecognizable. For years she'd believed that strength meant control. But control was an illusion, a steady hand in a world built on tremors. Her grandfather had once told her, "Precision without heart is just math." She finally understood what he meant. The people chasing her had precision, maybe even brilliance, but no heart. And she'd rather die with both than live without one. Staggered into an abandoned tram depot as dawn broke. His shoulder burned, the blood had soaked through his jacket. But his phone buzzed, a single encrypted ping. Upload VRFID, data live. He sank to the floor, laughing softly through the pain. They'd done it. The footage, the documents, the signatures, all of it was now in the hands of investigative units across 3 NATO networks. They couldn't bury it anymore. He closed his eyes. He whispered, "We did it." By midday, headlines began trickling out across internal defense channels. Unauthorized ballistic transfer investigation. Defense contracts suspended pending review. No names, no blame yet, but the fire had started. Read the article on a cracked phone screen inside the shack. Her name wasn't mentioned. That was good. She felt relief, but it was heavy, slow, wrapped in grief. Because justice doesn't erase what it costs. She didn't know where was, or if he'd survived. All she knew was that the world would now see what they'd both risked everything for. As night fell again, she packed her things, a small rucksack, the reloading press she'd kept hidden, her grandfather's micrometer. She wasn't going home. Not yet. She'd disappear for a while, find work in a quiet place. Keep moving until the noise faded. She looked out over the river one last time, whispering softly, "They can measure everything, Grandpa, but not this." Then she stepped into the darkness, swallowed by the same quiet that had always been her ally. Somewhere across the city, a phone buzzed in a hospital bed. Opened his eyes, weak but breathing. On the nightstand was a folded note left by someone who'd visited while he slept. No name, just a line written in her precise, careful handwriting. "Sometimes the cleanest shot is the one you never take." He smiled through the pain. Outside, the rain started again. Because in the end, precision doesn't just build weapons. It builds conscience. And conscience, once awakened, never goes quiet again. What does victory sound like when no one's cheering? For weeks, the world spoke in whispers. Not about Carver, her name never surfaced, but about irregularities in defense procurement, misconduct under review, classified oversight failures. Headlines ran for days, then faded under new noise. That was fine with her. Real victories don't need microphones. She read the news from a quiet town near the Italian border, a place where the air smelled of pine and diesel and nobody asked questions. Her right arm still ached from the night in Kaiserslautern, but the pain grounded her. Pain meant she'd lived through something worth remembering. She rented a room above a mechanic's shop. By day she helped repair engines, steady, methodical work. By night she wrote. Not reports, not statements, just truths. Everything she'd seen, learned, lost. She wrote them longhand, ink smudging across calloused fingers. A personal chronograph of conscience. Each page began with a date. Each entry ended the same way. Precision is responsibility. 2 months later, the storm finally reached Washington. Leaked files had forced a congressional subcommittee review. Headlines broke again, bigger this time. Private defense contractor implicated in ballistic data laundering scheme. Names followed. Shaw's photo. Then Hayes. The article said he'd turned himself in. Cooperated. Agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. He claimed the project had started as a sanctioned evaluation, later diverted by external funding. That he'd lost control. But new control had never been the point. It was justification. And justification always arrives too late. Still, she didn't hate him. She couldn't. He'd been part of a system built on compromise, and compromise spreads like rust. You don't notice it until the structure creaks. Recovered slower than expected. Shrapnel near his shoulder, nerve damage. But he was alive. She heard from him through a coded email sent from a rehabilitation center in Virginia. The story's out. They're calling us, but I told them you were never in it. Stay clear, you did your part. She smiled when she read it, a tired, honest smile that hurt in the best way. She typed only 4 words in reply. Still breathing, still precise. Autumn came. The mountains turned gold. The air sharpened, thinner, cleaner. She started teaching again, unofficially, quietly. Local hunters, competitive shooters, even a few young soldiers passing through on leave. They came to learn about aim, but she taught them something else. Anybody can pull a trigger, she'd say, fingers brushing the rifle stock like a violin bow. But discipline's the part no one can issue. Her students listened differently than the Marines once had. They didn't see a uniform. They saw a woman who'd walked through fire without letting the smoke stay on her. Sometimes they'd ask about Afghanistan or the competitions or the rumor about a missing staff sergeant who'd vanished after a scandal. She never confirmed anything. She just smiled and said, "Rumors are just stories waiting for the right listener." And they'd nod, not understanding, not yet. One evening she closed the shop early and climbed the hill overlooking the town. Below her, lights flickered like embers scattered by a steady wind. In her hand was a letter, official, folded, mailed through channels that still remembered her name. Staff Sergeant Carver, Honorable Discharge Service Review complete. A single line at the bottom, handwritten. Recommendation for reinstatement available upon request. She read it twice, then tucked it into her jacket. The Army was offering her a way back. The same institution that had once tried to erase her now wanted her again. For years, that would have been all she'd wanted. Recognition. Validation. The right to belong. But now belonging felt smaller than truth. She'd already earned something larger, peace built on her own terms. She folded the letter and set it under a stone at the hill's edge. Let the wind take the choice away. Winter came early. The first snow drifted down while she was at the range behind the mechanic's yard. Her rifle rested on a sandbag, breath clouding the air. Every pull of the trigger sent a plume of white dust rising off the berm. Each shot slower than the last. Measured, honest. She wasn't competing anymore. She was reminding herself who she was. The rifle's rhythm merged with her heartbeat, a metronome of calm. When the final round chambered, she paused, finger resting on the trigger guard. Then she whispered to the wind, "This one's not for them." And fired. The bullet tore through the paper target dead center. No celebration, no witness. Just truth. She lowered the rifle and smiled softly. Her grandfather used to say, "You don't aim to prove, you aim to understand." It had taken her a lifetime to understand what he meant. Weeks later, she received one more message. A small envelope, no return address. Inside, a single 9 casing polished to mirror shine, and a note written on old range paper. The world finally saw what precision looks like. G. She held the casing in her palm, feeling the tiny imperfections in the brass. Even perfection carries scars if you look close enough. She placed it beside her grandfather's micrometer on the shelf. 2 generations of tools, one for measuring metal, the other for measuring heart. Spring thawed the town. She began helping the local police marksmanship team, teaching them calm breathing and the science of patience. Sometimes they asked for advice about the pressure of taking a shot in real life. She always said the same thing. Decide before you aim what kind of person you want to be after the shot breaks. That answer left them quiet every time. One night, as she locked up, she noticed a figure waiting by the fence. Older man, worn jacket, military posture. For a heartbeat she thought Hayes. But no, the man smiled. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I served under Major Hayes before everything went bad. He asked me to find you, said if I ever did, to tell you he was sorry. Said you saved more than you know." His throat tightened. "He's..." The man nodded. "Prison hospital, cancer, doesn't have long." She looked down at her hands, steady. "Tell him I already forgave him," she said quietly, "but he has to forgive himself." The man nodded once, saluted awkwardly, and walked away. For a long moment she stood in the cold, the echo of boots fading into night. Forgiveness. It sounded easier than it felt. But it was the only shot worth taking now. Months passed. The scandal faded into history, replaced by new crises, new noise. People forgot the names. But some lessons stay long after the noise dies. A new regulation emerged quietly, requiring independent oversight on all ballistic data programs. They called it the Carver Clause. No one knew where the name came from. Never corrected them. She didn't need her face in a briefing slide. She just needed to know the next soldier would never have her trust stolen the same way. On a summer evening 2 years later, she stood on a rifle line again, guest instructor for a new joint service course. Different faces, same challenge. The students whispered about her the way soldiers always whisper about myths. When one finally gathered the courage to ask, "Ma'am, is it true you once built ammo that beat the Marines with their own rifles?" She just smiled. "Truth's like a bullet," she said. "You only get one clean shot, make sure it counts." They laughed softly, not knowing how much weight those words carried. Later, as the sun sank low, sat alone at the edge of the range. The horizon burned orange, and every sound softened into memory. She thought of still in the States, still walking the slow road of recovery. They talked sometimes, not about the past, just life. He'd bought land in Montana, built a small shop. He called it Carver and Son Ballistics, even though he didn't have a son. When she'd asked why, he'd said, "Because the name deserves to keep teaching." She laughed through tears. As night settled, she opened her old field journal one last time. The pages were weathered, corners torn, edges stained with oil. On the final blank page she wrote, "I learned that silence can break harder than bullets. But sometimes silence saves. I learned that precision without heart is control. And control without conscience is just aimless noise. I learned that strength isn't pulling the trigger. It's knowing when not to." She closed the book, set it beside her on the bench, and looked at the stars climbing over the horizon. In the distance, the faint echo of a rifle cracked, another team training under the night sky. She smiled. The world kept turning. People kept learning. And somewhere in that rhythm of breath and trigger, patience and purpose, she heard what peace finally sounds like. Not applause. Not command. Just the steady heartbeat of someone who refuses to quit. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And sometimes the truest shot isn't about hitting the target. It's about refusing to aim small when the truth is larger.